There's something out there waiting for us. And it ain't no man.
Don't you even know how to be a real Indian?
Well, sometimes they have to kill us. They have to kill us. Because they can't break our spirit.
Hey everybody, it's Ian, back again for another episode of Native Film Talk, and today, actually, a couple days ago, I've been sitting on this interview for a little bit. I went home to the res for the first time. I should say I've been to the res numerous times over the past couple years, but I hadn't gone to my res. The Navajo res, for those of you that don't know, is about the size of West Virginia. It's a pretty big freaking res, and I'm from the west side of it. My wife's from the other side of the res, and that's about a 3-hour drive. So when I always say I'm going back home, usually me and my wife's, and I usually go to my in-laws, and I love it out there. And my parents come and visit me pretty often, and my grandparents come visit, and I just haven't had the opportunity to go home. And it was my son's first time going back to where I was born, where I was raised, and it was awesome. I had so much fun. So I apologize for not pushing this one out earlier, but I had an interview with Mark Tilsen. If you don't know who Mark Tilsen is, he's many things. He's a former educator. I would say he's still an educator. He's an activist, and I think that's his primary role now. But at least that's his primary function in life. When you talk to him, you can hear that. It's like his activism, because there's always a fight to be fought, and there's always a next battle, and he's always willing to go fight that fight. And he's most notably, I think, outside of all this, to me, he's a thought leader as well, very much in the same vein that the AIM thought leaders came about, people like Russell Means and John Trudell. Out of the activism came leaders, came indigenous people that we turn to lean on them for their opinions, their insight, because being in these fights for as long as these individuals are, whether it's Dakota Access Pipeline or fighting the tar sands, the oil fields, it brings out a different kind of thought process and mindset, and it takes a certain individual that is just relishing in that fight and relishing in that struggle, and can rise above and around the cause and form a community and fight for something. And he has a lot of great insight, and I consider him a thought leader. I met him on the app Clubhouse and never knew who he was until then. But some people, you hear them talk and you're like, I don't know anybody that talks like him. I don't know anybody that pieces together words the way that he does. And, he was calling in from Hawaii, so we did have some technical issues there for a few times at the beginning, and the audio isn't 100% where it should be, but we did our best, we made it work, and if you can look past that, I think you'll enjoy the conversation. Mark is just an impressive individual. And I joke around and I say a bunch of nice things about him. And I tell him, I say that, but I would never tell you that to your face. I consider him a friend. He's one of those people that will just tell it to you straight, but will also have your back in the most ride or die way. And he's definitely an impressive individual. And he's just somebody who you just want to pick their brain and just ask them questions of what do you think about this? Why do you think that is? How does it end up like that? Where do we go from here? And that's basically what I did for an hour. Just basically picked his brain and tried to have a conversation on his level. But frankly, I don't think I'm on his level. I don't think very many people are on his level. I'm just enamored by his brain, enamored by his thought process. And I just had a blast talking to him. It's been a while since me and him have had a chance to just chat one-on-one. So this was a good time for me. And once again, apologize for some of the audio issues, but I think overall you'll enjoy the conversation. All right, everybody, have a good one. All right. Well, today I invited Mark Tilsen on to just have a chat. I met Mark on Clubhouse, which it sounds like we met on a dating app when I say it like that, but I met him on Clubhouse, didn't know who he was, and he just popped into the same room where I was talking in, and then we both were like, hey, we both like Dragon Ball Z, had some of the same interests, and we just like peeled off into a private room. We just had a chat, and I'm like, man, this guy's pretty freaking cool. And so I kind of got to know him a little bit more ever since then. It's been maybe 3 months now. And he's a Lakota poet. He's a lot of things. He's an activist, continuing activist, lifelong activist. And I think that there's just a lot that he has to bring to the table. I consider him a thought leader. When he speaks, I really respect his opinion. I would never tell him that to his face if it wasn't for this interview. But I think really, really, really think highly of his opinions. And so I just wanted to have him come on and just see where we are with the state of affairs and representation and just pick his brain. And also, I didn't plan for this, but with the Keystone XL pipeline happenings, I think I'd like to get you to talk about that as well, since that aligns with what you're active in. But yeah, I just go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll get to it.
Oh, my name is Mark Kenneth Tilsen. I'm an Oglala Lakota poet, an educator from Porcupine, South Dakota. I guess why I became relevant as an activist or a thought leader was during Standing Rock. I was one of the people who was on the ground teaching nonviolent direct action, action roles, and pulling stuff off to help shut down the pipeline. Yeah, I was a school teacher before Standing Rock.
Oh, wow.
I was English. I taught high school seniors, and at Standing Rock, I started throwing down, and I had a moment in my life where I could choose to build a house and have a career, and like get the metallic blue Subaru Crosstrek XV that I wanted. And or I could keep throwing down, or I could keep fighting the pipeline, keep sticking it to DAPL. And I chose to stay at Standing Rock. And I kind of gave up every part of my life to be there.
Wow.
And it changed my life. It changed the trajectory of where I was going and what I was doing. Yeah. And I've been kind of on that journey of fighting pipelines and being one of the, not many, but one of the people that basically will show up across the country if I'm asked to.
Wow.
And what's kind of funny is after you start going to these fights over and over again, you see a lot of familiar faces. You see,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe some of the people you met along the way?
Yeah, that's kind of the thing.
Okay, that's all right. So
no,
why
no,
why
let me talk about that for 1 second. That's like security culture 101 kind of stuff. Is like like you just don't name names, like and you don't name names on social media, yeah, you'll see each other. And like some of my comrades, I didn't know some of them I still don't know their legal names or real names. And that's okay, because we've been at this for years now, and we built up a level of trust and we understand each other. And it's like, I'm going to find out your legal name once you get pinched and we got to bail you out, but I'm not going to use it in casual conversation.
So I think that was something that drew me to you initially. I'm just like, who the hell is this guy? That's putting it light. I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Because some of the stuff you would say, it would go real like dark web kind of speak when you were even now, just your whole vernacular change and your demeanor. And if you would have told me, I feel like you're like in a fucking Saving Private Ryan, Tom Hanks secretly a school teacher and everyone's surprised. Like I had no idea that I've known you for a little bit now. I had no idea you were a school teacher. I knew you were an English major in college and I knew you were a poet, but I didn't know school teacher is what you were prior to all of this. So do you ever look at it fondly, or are you glad you made the switch and doing what you do now?
One of the biggest regrets I ever have in my life is choosing not to be there for my kids.
Right.
And that's tough. Like, because I didn't just work with seniors. I work with poets. So there's where kids, I've been working with them for years, and we were we were looking forward to having our time together. And like I wanted to be their teacher. And there's other younger kids that were coming up that like I knew. I like to think they understood, and I like to think they forgave me for not being there. And and I still talk to the poets I was working with. And yeah, that was one of the biggest losses because, yeah, I mean, the material stuff you don't really care that much about, like the house, the car. My then relationship was the most long-term relationship I had at the time. And you kind of like sometimes doing movement work, those moments ask of you, what are you willing to sacrifice? And it just keeps asking more. And then it's like, are you willing to give up your freedom? Like, yeah, I got you. Whatever you need. How about everything else?
Man.
Like, all right. If this is what's needed. and it's not ideal. I mean, I know people who struggle with it. Most of the people out there who are doing real work, they're working class folks. So they'll spend half of the year building up a war chest. And most of them have partners or a situation or a living situation where they can go deploy for 6, 7, 8 months out of the year and be on the front lines, be in these camps. And because like there's kind of this illusion that there's a professional class of frontline activists, and it's kind of not true. Like that's kind of a really rare gig that doesn't exist for most people. Yeah.
So it sounds like to me that one, there's a huge misconception about all of that. That when you think about it, somebody who is a professional activist who really goes from camp to camp or site to site, group to group, it's like, how do you get money? Really, you are a nomad. You might have a side gig, but you almost have to sustain that kind of lifestyle to be fighting the good fight. You can only rely, I think, on people's good graces for so long because they're probably doing the same, right?
Yeah. Sometimes you become a poet and start selling a book.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. You have 2 books actually. But the first one, the one I'm more familiar with, is It Ain't Over Until We're Smoking Cigars on the Drill Pad. And that's a compilation of poetry that you had cultivated over your time at the camps. And you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was mostly, it's kind of like a love letter to other water protectors and frontliners. Like, hey, this is what we lived through together. This is a part of it. This isn't all of it. This isn't your version, but this is what I remember and what I saw. And this is like a cherished moment of some of the good times and a lot of the hard times. And I begin the book by saying, hey, these are incomplete. Like, this isn't the totality of what we experienced. This is just a sliver of what I can capture for all of us. And the very fact that other people resonate with it, and the very fact that like the book has been to more front lines than I have. Like I meet people who are like doing border defense over at Fumi Island, and they're like, "Hey, I read your book." I was like, "Wow, awesome!" And I met people who were dangling off a bridge in like one of the ports of Texas, and they're like, "While I was up there, I read your book," and you know, it's been up to Camp Luke's over at the Tiny House Warriors.
Wow.
The book's been the book's been more places than I have been. It's been from like New Brunswick to like the port of Vancouver in BC.
So have people told you they resonate with what you're saying, or do they see themselves in some of their experiences in what you wrote?
Yeah, and for some people, it's like we run into this current thing that whenever we have a really strong, mostly youth-based indigenous defense of the land, other indigenous people will come to try to crush it and shut it down, control it, shape it. And it's rare that doesn't happen. So, and it's also a warning and a heads up, like, watch your left flank. Like, you're gonna get out organized by the locals who are gonna try to shut you down. And then you have to just realize, like, is your defense of land based on respecting indigenous communities, or is your obligation large? Like, I got a grudge to pick with some random people out there, but there's an analysis. There is a popularized analysis that it was native nonprofits and members of the nonprofit industrial complex that tried to tame the resistance at Standing Rock, when it was way more complicated than that, and also entirely in the hands of Lakota people. Like, we didn't get defeated by the cops or the president or DAPL. It was actually one another that shut each other down.
I think that's so symbolic of you can take that story and have that translate across so many freaking different, that has so many parallels to Indian country, just how we do that too often to ourselves. And that's the story that people don't want to hear, because especially we want to have that idea that, hey, we all unite, we ride, ships all rise together with the rising tide, and we're just like, well, it's more like crabs in the bucket at times, unfortunately. And I think what I also wanted to get you to talk about when it, as it pertains to representation, is, in not just in film and television, but just in the media, like, because they all influence each other. Like, how does that existing kind of archetype of who the native is, who the indigenous person is, now that we've evolved to that term, using what do you guys come across the most? It's like, shit, that's what you think of us, even amongst our people.
Well, I mean, mostly we're still invisible. Like 99.9% of our interaction with the larger world is through invisibility. I think CNN is probably one of the few places where we're not. And you have like Simone Moyo Smith, you have Giassi Ross, Sarah Sunshine Manning, and I guess if your only interaction with Indian country was those folks, you'd think we're all like hyper stylish professionals and college educated. So it's not the worst. It's not the absolute worst representation possible. But again, like this minor representation in Amord is mostly in the largest sea of invisibility. I actually think that the greater, like, 3.0 kind of thinking project is, how do we envision our future? Because that's way more of an interesting project to engage in. And I'll talk about representation in film and media a little bit, but what I want to say is, like, how our young people perceive themselves is infinitely more important than how dominant society perceives them.
That's a great point.
And we know, because we read the studies, that there currently is a loop. Like, how dominant society portrays us gets fed back to ourselves, and then we learn the native mythos through the colonial lens, and we internalize it. And when it's a really harsh, negative, oh, we're all self-destructive alcoholic drunks, and then the young people looking like, I know that's not true for every community. My community is really violent. Like, I love my people. I'm Oglala Lakota, o Yuchpe, of the Port Spence, South Dakota, Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and we're regularly one of the poorest reservations in the country with the highest suicide rates.
Mm-hmm.
One of the highest rates of cancer. We have, like, a couple of our towns has the equivalent murder rate of a large city. And so it's a place of immense violence. And so whenever there's really, really negative shit out in the media, it gets internalized. And, you know, as a teacher, I had a couple of my seniors ask questions about Native literature. And it's like, if it just reinforces our trauma, if Native literature only reinforces our trauma, what value is in it? I was like, damn, this isn't even an AP class. Okay.
That's
okay.
that's a revelation you hit. That's like elder knowledge right there.
I know, right?
That's amazing. But
it's also kind of a wake-up call to us as creators, us as poets, us as writers. It's like, we need to engage and take some cue cards from Afrofuturism. Like, we have to be able to envision a non-colonial based future. Otherwise, what dreams are we selling to our kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Otherwise, all we're giving them is directives and not a path, because that's really what we're doing. We're just make it better for the next generation, and we can be laid to rest knowing that we gave them that directive with no direction, you know. And then they're just like, well, shit. What did you mean by that? I wish I asked them more. And we suffer from that. Our generation, you know, we're about the same age. We suffer from the go get an education and come back and help your people with no details, you know. And you come back and you're faced with, you know, well, you think you're better than us now? What do you think you are? You know, coming back with your fancy degree. It's just like, bro, I'm from here. What do you mean? But in every college educated individual who's from a native reservation, when they go back, they get met with that. And we were all faced with the same struggles because we have the same messages fed to us. And it's interesting that what you had just said about that kid, that freaking, you know, thought leader, is why feed into what isn't going to help us? Why support? Why continue to do what we're not going to find value in?
Yeah, and my answer is not by way of the conversation with the kid, but a conversation I've had with some other frontliners. And back in, I think, 2018, we're still getting our asses kicked. One of my comrades asked me, like, what's the point of fighting if we know we're going to lose? And I was like, for the ever-loving joy of it, to see your enemies flee before you and hear the lamentation of their women.
Yeah, Conan was definitely onto something, man. You'd rather die with a sword in your hand.
Yeah, and like we fight because it gives us life. True. But we fight for possibility. Like like we exist because our ancestors continued to fight. Because they didn't surrender, because they didn't give up. And that's why we exist as people, as indigenous people, is because of the struggles and the sacrifices of those who came before us. And it wasn't because they fought because they knew victory was assured, but almost the inverse, the opposite. Once you admit defeat and stay defeated, there's a finality. And then the loss of language is complete or inevitable. The loss of land shortly thereafter. And the loss of all of our struggles. Like, I'm probably of the minority, but not really. Yeah, I'm probably of a minority of opinion, but like, indigenous people have to destroy capitalism because no one else can. No one else.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else is too invested. Everyone else is too fucking colonized. Everyone else is too uncomfortable. And like, I'm on vacation. All right, check this out. I'm on vacation, and from working in a homeless camp from October to May. And hold on, let me show you where I'm staying.
Yeah.
Hold on. How do I flip camera? There.
You're okay.
Yeah. The middle one's my tent.
That's awesome.
And my bro, who's out here, after Standing Rock, he was like, why keep paying rent when we can just live on the land? And he had some land that he could go live on. And it, like, kind of being part of these fights, they teach you, maybe I don't need indoor plumbing. Maybe, like right now I'm rocking like a USB fan head up to a power bank to cool myself off at night instead of an indoor air conditioner. And like, being indigenous, a lot of us know what it's like, how to hustle when the food gets low.
Yep.
To know how to like entertain ourselves on growing up. We had 3 TV channels, and mostly it was horrible programming.
Yep.
So we know boredom.
Sure.
like we know heat, we know deprivation, we know cold, we know boredom. And like, it isn't like, I think something like 30% of my res still doesn't have indoor plumbing.
Yep, same here. 1/3 of our res, no running water.
Right. And like, these like, I don't like to make excuses for colonization and saying these hardships are so valuable to us, but they do teach us things. And they teach us also not to value the colonial offer that's laid down in front of us. And I believe that indigenous people are some of the only people that are willing to not theoretically, but actually go all in to fight capitalism. Because we never really bought in, because it doesn't actually work for us. Because maybe you don't need a degree and an understanding of Marxism to know that this was a rigged game never meant for you.
Yep. Well, and I think if you have, and not to say that this is a place for a source of knowledge, but in general, if you have access to a YouTube, podcasts, there's a university right there. You can have the best university of all time. If you can cultivate your own education, you can curate your own education, you can learn whatever you want because somebody else is spewing it out into the ether, and they're there just to build a following, but also to share because they're like, hey, this is some good shit. I want to share it. And conversely, it can also go the other way. You can waste your time and learn nothing. But I really think that what you said is true. is that sometimes I went to Dartmouth and I have my MBA, and I'm sick of both because I go on YouTube and I go and just see it on Twitter, TikTok. I'm just like, fuck, I could have, if I was industrious enough, I could have saved a whole lot of money and just got all my knowledge from social media, from Twitter, podcasts, and YouTube.
I think that, oh my God.
Like that's your library card these days from what it was 50 years ago.
Right. There was, God, there's a website. It's kind of like a social media site. I can't remember the fucking name of it. It's not Pinterest. It's mostly it's photos, but a lot of text. The format is similar to Reddit.
Okay. Like 4chan? Oh, that's old. Never mind.
No. A newer one. Like they used to have pornography on it, and they got shut down, and they took that off, and it kind of died on the vine because of it. Anyways, there's websites, there's social media sites that will teach you just as much critical race theory and understanding of like white privilege and like Foucault and like gender trouble and like I learned as much from memes as I did from my college classes.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so I want to talk about that. You being self-proclaimed a propagator of memes, you have retired your title, but you have the best. You have the best meme game, I think, on a lot of people I follow, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like there's the joke memes that you send around to your friends, but now meme culture has evolved to the degree where it's like you're dropping truth bombs left and right and insight about communities that you like. Sometimes you can remove the community, remove the context, and you could be talking about like deep next level knowledge in any arena, in the most technical arena, and there's a community that can resonate with it. And I think that's freaking powerful, and it's almost in code, because if you're not in that community, you have no idea what it is.
Right. Like I'm sitting in a tiny pool to cool down. It's starting, the heat of the day is starting to get on me. Yeah, like one of the things that I love about memes and meme culture and how crafty it is, and like there's memes and counter memes. It's like there's actually a counter movement to like the auntie uncle memes. It's like, ew, you're hypersexualizing our relatives. And I was like, how did you think you got those relatives though?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like I was on a Clubhouse chat and I was like, well, in my community, we got like, the average family size is 4 or 5 people. And they're like, where are you from where your average family size is 5 kids?
I didn't know they had residents in Bel
that's
Air.
not a big family. Yeah, that's not a big family, by the way. That's a normal family.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, my dad's family had, let's see how many of them are there. There was 5 of them. And my mom had a whole bunch of her brothers and sisters, but I didn't want to count them all. And then for us, there was like 8 of us as kids. We didn't feel that was abnormal at all growing up on the res, having like 8 brothers and sisters.
Yep, for sure. That doesn't even count first cousins because you just live right next to them, so but you just call them brother and sister too. I think that was like I didn't learn the term first cousin, second cousin until I like went to college, because it was just brother, sister. I had a shitload of brothers and sisters my whole life.
I actually, like, this is one of the things that I get a little bit pushback from my Jewish relatives is like the first cousin once removed, and it just feels so insulting. Like, why would I remove you? Like, why are you removing yourself from me? Like,
yeah, that's interesting.
You're an uncle because you're that generation of my dad, regardless of our fucking first cousin status. Like, our whatever that once removed shit really is. And because I got cousins who are like some shirt tail relatives And whenever we see each other, like, cousin. And I love that. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite parts of being Lakota.
I think what you're saying is cool because it's filling the void that isn't being filled in film and film and media. It's like we're able to create our own representation. We're able to create a void. Fill that void with our own shit, whether it's memes, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Like for every generation that's on social media, there's an avenue for them to find what needs to be found. And I think what's interesting when it comes to education is it's almost like where it is, we're at this like precipice or this tipping point where the fulcrum is like almost back in the day when it came to, reading Latin or not. It's like, well, we're the knowledge holders because we can read Latin and the rest of you can't. So you're at the mercy of what we know. And I feel like that's what college used to be. It used to be this gatekeeping, thing when it was like, hey, I have access to the highest, most, important leather-bound books. So therefore, I'm somebody of importance. But now it's like if you have access to the internet, you're up there with anybody.
Yeah, if you can like deal with and decipher an Indian or Pakistani accent, you have access to most computer languages for free. Because there's 2 to 3 hour tutorials that are just chilling on YouTube, waiting for you to watch.
Yep.
And like that's learn the code, bro. Yeah. I mean, if you wanted an entry level 6-figure income, you can learn the code. And because of COVID, you don't have to be living in Cupertino to do it anymore.
Nope. You can, they got just codeacademy.com. I learned, real basic Python just on that on my own. You can go at your own pace. You can learn any language you want, any coding language. And that's not a plug. That's free. You go to codeacademy.com. It's completely free. It's just a bunch of coders that are like, hey, the next generation of kids needs access to this. If they don't have access, we're going to give it to them. Fuck it. Here you go. And they just like, it's amazing that that's out there. And you can do that from your phone.
Just to tell everyone, I use stamps.com, everyone. And if you'd like my promo code, hit me up in the DMs. Stamps.com.
Stamps.com.
Aren't you sick of going to the post office?
Yeah. What I really don't like is chafing underwear. So MeUndies, everybody. Let's talk about MeUndies. Supporter of the podcast. Just kidding. No,
It's made from modal.
Yeah.
Modal. Modal.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that shows we both listen to too many podcasts.
Lakota. Do you watch? It sounds like you listen to Bill Burr.
Yep. We got tickets to June 30th, bro, and he comes to Phoenix. He's my favorite.
Live. I really dug the show. I really dug his live, and then I seen him. Jesus Christ, it must have been 5 years ago. Yeah, good performer.
Yeah, I've seen him, 6 times now. He's my favorite comedian, so I look out for him. I listen to him as much as possible. But what's interesting,
I like him because he's smart and uneducated.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think there's people that I think that's the way of the future is like the thought leaders in communities is being down to earth but super intelligent. And I think that's part of like your allure. Like you don't pretend to be anybody. And I think that's one thing that really, you just seem like the kind of guy that the smartest people I know now love to look not smart. They love it when people think they don't look intelligent. Like that's like the mark of like a status symbol for them. They're like, oh, I love it when people think I look stupid. And that's not to say you look stupid, but you like you look at you're like, oh, he's just another guy. But then you hear you talk and you're just like, holy fucking shit. Like that guy knows a lot, and not just a lot. He's a deep thinker. Like he's pontificating to himself all the time. He's having these deep conversations in his mind, and you just want to pick your brain. And I think that's fascinating, but you're just unassuming. And I think that's amazing because I think there are people that are the highest of the high. They have their place, but the everyday thought leaders, we need to cultivate their ideas and take action.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think it's people, I think there's a pretentiousness that can exist when people have what they imagine like the correct idea. And like to be perfectly honest, from the shit that I've seen out there, there is not a, other than full scale like the revolution and destruction of Western civilization, there's not a way out of this civilization, economic, ecological collapse coming. So there's not somebody who is like, I know, I can envision it. Like AOC is not saying if we just do the Green New Deal, it's gonna be okay. It was like, hey, you have 3 branches of government and it's not getting done at all, and your own fucking party is holding you up, and electoral politics has failed us again. And so it's like, out of like the miasma of, let's just loosely call us the left, which means not right. I'm listening to everyone that you're listening to, and I'm not seeing really smart like future goals and ideas. And it's not like, so the smartest kids in the room have already failed us. So let's start listening to the class clowns. At least it's going to be entertaining on our way down.
I think that's what it is. I think we're starving for levity and we don't realize it. And we really
things are absolutely absurd and that dark.
And I really think that but I think we've suppressed those voices for so long that it took us to be in this state to realize, like, fuck, we should have been listening to these people a long time ago. They should have been at the table a long time ago. And I think it shows in representation. I mean, same shit's happening in film and media, where for the longest time it was white people, non-native people telling our stories for us. And now that we're starting to tell our stories, so like, man, these guys got really good stories to tell. It's like, yeah, no fucking shit, you know? It's like we have, to date, probably the long-standing relationship with this earth. And we have a lot of stories that are rooted in our history, rooted in our ancestors. Some we can't tell you, some we can, but where we have our relationship with our countries that occupy us now, we have some really good stories to tell. The truth needs to be told, and I think people are hungry for the truth. And if we're given the opportunity to tell it, I think people will gravitate toward it and want us to tell more.
Yeah.
Because
I know we're going to kind of come around and talking about representation, and okay. I had an opportunity to like live in Hollywood for a handful of months after standing up, until we started doing too much boozing and drinking and fighting and ran out of money. So they kicked us out of Hollywood. Not the town officially, but
yeah,
might as well been. I ran into like 3 things. One, about half of the quote unquote native actors and actresses aren't
native.
Like, they're not bad people. I like them. I don't even like their work. But they're not native, have been represented as such because having a life in Hollywood is so mercenary that once you get typecasted, you're pretty typecasted. That's 99% of the people who can even find work. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's one. Let's see. Number 2 was it's still 1992 in Hollywood, where whenever you're going to have a native, it's going to be a white person telling that story.
Yep.
And like, so NBC Universal created this position where they would literally, for their primetime and evening lineup, would pay the wages of any native actor or actress that was on the show. So you would have a free character. You would have a actually paid for free character on your show as long as they're, it's a native actor, actress, and they play a native character. I think 0 shows picked up any native characters.
Jeez.
And because they didn't have any natives in the writing room, and they didn't have any native producers. And they were like FX. FX had
Got Reservation Dogs.
Oh no. This is actually a correction. This is before that.
Oh shit.
I want to say, God, it was a TV show. I want to say The Chosen.
Okay.
It's a TV show set in the X-Men universe.
Mm.
And they had a native character. And other than being slightly tan and like edgy, because I do know some slightly tan and edgy natives. Don't get me wrong. That is a trope. That is a real thing and also a trope. But other than being slightly tan and edgy, they didn't write the character as a native character. It was just like a, I think his hair was like shoulder length and he had a leather bracelet. And they're like, that's native. Dude, if I ever see a native guy, he's got shoulder length hair and he's rocking a thick leather bracelet. And I was like, he doesn't even have any cheesy turquoise on there. Like you could actually do that thing and just go one slight step further to make it at least quote unquote authentic. But maybe, and also being cheesy is also like an authentically native thing to do and be.
That's true. That's so true.
Yeah, and like I think God bless Taika Waititi. Like he is the indigenous superstar that is opening up doors for native people. Dallas Goldtooth hopefully can go on and pursue his acting career and quit trying to live up in his father's shadow over at IEN. Don't worry, Dallas. I'll tell that to your face next time I see you. And the 1491s get some roots in Sterling. Sterling's been cranking out and he's been trying to do a home run for over a decade and a half. And I think this is it, man. Reservation Dogs. They tried to do that adaptation of Scalped for FX, I think 3 years ago. And the material just fell apart. Didn't have strong enough source material.
Mm-hmm.
It was, again, white fantasy. And I was talking to Bobby. I was like, hey, man, this is a really shit comic, by the way. That's insulting to the people of Pine Ridge and who are Oglala, because they're taking our stories, bastardizing it in the most ugly way possible, literally creating us into ugly, like physically and spiritually ugly caricatures of ourselves. That doesn't give us anything. Again, back to the literary theory. I can't remember this kid's name. What value is our art if it doesn't uplift us?
Yep. I think lately I've come to that realization. So I try to not go too far back. I try to really be picky about the stuff I review, because it's just like, yeah, I can go back in the back catalog and go look at the golden age of Hollywood. I can go look at all the John Wayne movies. I can look at any Western, any John Ford Western, and pick that apart. But all I'm going to do is depress myself and depress my audience. I might offer insight, but it's actually not going to provide value, what you're saying.
Yeah, like one of my favorite characters, and they couldn't even, they almost were willing to do him right, was Graham Greene in Clear Cut.
God, that was a powerful character.
Like, hey, I'm not going to make excuses. I'm gonna grab the white oppressor who's destroying my land, and I'm gonna torture him again and again, and again. And somehow I'm the bad guy.
Yeah. That, over the time and doing this podcast, I've seen Graham Greene in interviews. I feel like that was the first time I saw him not acting. I feel like that's who he is, like who he really wants to be. You know, I feel like I want to interview him and corner him and be like, hey Graham, I want to interview you about one of your roles, and he's just like, fuck Dances with Wolves. I don't want to talk about Wind River. I'm like, I want to talk to you about Clear Cut. He's like, oh, my life experience in '91. Let's talk about it. Because I feel like that's a genuine character that I didn't even know about. One of the listeners of the show told me about that movie, and I found it on YouTube. And I was just like, holy shit, why does nobody talk about this movie? Because it's powerful. And it's that's like the OG, that's more powerful than Smoke Signals to me. Because that's like, you watch that, you're like, that's next level writing, that's next level acting, that's next level perception of who Native people are, who they see themselves as, who they want to be, who they aspire to be. And it's awesome.
Again, this was, I think, the third thing I was going to talk about is like, whenever we have a Native story, like where either mystical or so tragic and broken, like for the longest time, I disagree with it now, but my opinion was my favorite Native character in any movie is Wes Studi in Heat. He's just a guy who's brave and does his job.
Yep, absolutely.
And then, like, then I gotta realize it's like, hey, but he has no dimension and he's a fucking cop. And is that what I actually want to hold up as the best thing that we've ever done? I was like, Magua is a fucking better character than that.
Yep.
Like Russell
Chingachgook,
yeah, is a better character than that in Last of the Mohicans. And it's like, but like that's the thing is like,
but that's the journey you take with your identity.
Yeah, and like I think that, like, we need more Graham Greens in Clear Cut, like in real life and in representation. like, and I like, I think that like whether like not to stray too far from the field, but like John Rambo, the character, his character biography, he's a Native man.
Yep, he's half Navajo.
Like that's more Native than I am. Like,
well, I think but even then,
he doesn't read as a Native character though.
And you could argue that that's more accurate representation than anything, because he's just existing in the world. There's not they're not putting a hat on him saying like, hey, here's the hat that says he's Native. There's his name tag. He's Native. Name tag in the form of a headdress or a bracelet. And it's a misrepresentation.
He's got the shoulder length hair.
Yeah, he's got the shoulder length hair. Yeah, he does. I think, but he never has to have that moment where he stares off into the distance and flute music plays and he has an epiphany of what he needs to do next,
Yeah.
So,
I don't think I know any Navajos as badass as Rambo.
No. You'd have to, unfortunately, there's not many.
And I think the Lakotas that I did know who are badass as Rambo, I think they're all dead.
I agree. So I got a comment about something you could continue to do. Why don't you start a podcast? Or are you interested in starting a podcast? I feel like you just doing the Bill Burr, method of just hitting record and just rambling. I think that would be hella entertaining.
Oh, yeah. Like I'm busy. Like, the only thing is, but like, I've taken a month off from working at Camp Louisiana, which is like from October to May.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to. I've been on podcasts. I like being on podcasts. I like talking. It's just I just haven't yet. I haven't really carved out or been intentional about how I spend my time.
Got it.
Like I was like yesterday. I was talking to this. Like I'm starting this weight loss program called Optivia. And, Optivia, use promo code Tilsen, Tilsen. Kidding.
There we go.
No. But like they were like, what is your weight loss goals? And I'm like, what do you mean goals? Like, I don't have goals. Like, I don't really want things. Like, the things I want are huge, epic. I was like, I want to change the nature of how our civilization functions. I want to quit like having society shit on homeless people and criminalize them. And I want to give them enough resources. And yeah, let's say, hey, some of your behaviors appear to be anti-social.
They're like, no, sir.
Like,
what?
Like,
yeah. They're like, no, sir. We just want to take your order for the restaurant. Can you tell us what you want to eat?
Yeah, right. Like food, water, shelter, and what I love, Suhair Hamad said, well-fed human dignity, babe. And so, like, the things that I want are huge, but the things that I want for myself are like, I want to live a tent life with 3 weeks. Like, that's I myself run into a situation where I don't have a burning desire to want and create things. And I'm not very ambitious in my professional life. Like, I've had opportunities to like pitch pilots to, I think, definitely Netflix and a couple of different studios in Hollywood. And it's like, I didn't have shit to say. I didn't have a project. I didn't have a product ready to go for them. And I've still had this opportunity, and it's been like withering on the vine for years. And it's like I still haven't carved out enough space and time in my life to give them something worthwhile that would take years to bring into fruition. Because there's Line 3, because there's Bayou Bridge, because there's the Camp Mini Luzaha and the Mini Luzaha Creek Patrol, because there's always another fight that's going on the ground with such incredible immediacy that requires our attention. And I'm still running into the same 100 fucking faces from camp to camp to camp.
So that's a perfect segue into some of the wins, I guess. The recent news, the Keystone XL pipeline. Where do you think that takes us? And where does that land in like the win category? And what can, is it a tipping point? Is it just a success we can talk about for a little bit and then keep fighting the good fight? Like where does that stand? Because that's a long standing battle. Because the developer finally pulled the plug, and they were already told they couldn't develop in January. It took 5 months for them to finally pull the plug? 6 months.
But like I call him like Jake LaMotta, who's just staggering in at the 15th round. He's like, "Hey Ray, you never got me down, Ray. You never got me down." Like, why won't you just die? Like, cue SpongeBob meme. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? We've been battering the shit out of you for 10 fucking years. I got people facing charges up on Cheyenne River fighting you. And it's just this zombie that keeps staggering out like a little kid's nightmare. And now it's like, it comes down to Sun Tzu. Like, an enemy is not defeated until they know they are. Dramatic pause.
Dramatic pause and insert another relevant story. I think that can be with the whole AMC, GM, GameStop short squeeze. It could be with Occupy Wall Street. It can be with anything. They have not admitted defeat, so it's not over. It's not over. That their pockets run so deep that the idea of defeat to them, their level of confidence, which is also arrogance, is rooted so deep that you have to fight them to the end until they're less than till they are completely sucked dry. But also even past that, until they have no money left, until they have no resources left. And even then, it's still going to take time. It's exactly what you said with the SpongeBob meme. How many times you got to teach you this lesson, old man? Like, they just keep coming back.
I'm reminded of season 4 of the X-Men animated series, where Archangel is talking to Rogue about killing Apocalypse. And he's like, I will see him split, broken, defeated. And like, that's kind of how we have to take it with these fuckers. Because this isn't killing the tar sands. Tar sands is still operating today and will be operating foreseeably for the future until it isn't. And by clipping off, like, we keep fighting these Hydra heads on these pipelines, but they're not the source. And right now there's not an epic, like, lithium ion batteries in the Tesla era is going to be a shitty transition to a fossil-free future. And the sacrifice is going to be Bolivia, Australia, Africa. That's going to pay the cost of transitioning the globe. And whenever we see extraction from indigenous lands, we see bloodshed of indigenous people. And unless, like, the University of Texas can really pull off this fucking graphene supercell shit that they've been preaching for the past 10 years, like, they need a breakthrough fucking ASAP. Because people are now, like, Ford and Biden just released what was it?
The electric truck, the F-150.
Yeah, the F1 Lightning.
F1 Lightning, thank you.
Yeah, F-150 Lightning. Running on lithium, bro.
Yep.
And it's better, and indigenous people still have to bear the brunt every fucking time. And it doesn't matter if it's coal extraction. It doesn't matter if it's fucking uranium. It doesn't matter if it's fucking hydroelectric. Every single time there is energy extraction, it comes at the cost of indigenous lives.
Livelihood and lives. Because you look at, you can see it because I'm on Zoom, but my scar right here, my lip, I was like, that's a cleft palate. I was about to cleft lip, cleft palate, because my mom grew up downwind from a uranium mine on the res. And, like, there's never going to be anything with that. And consequently, me and my brothers, we all had birth defects. But it's like, nobody cares, because, well, among Indian country, nobody cares because we turn it into the oppression Olympics. Oh, you got that, I got this. We don't even empathize with each other. But I think the other thing is when you tell it to white people, they just hold their hand over their heart and they're just like, oh, I'm so happy that I came across you, because now I have a poor Indian story that I can tell to my other white friends, that I know somebody who has faced oppression. And I think that's frustrating, because it's like, I'm telling you because I want people to know that that's the shit that happens. But it's like, they don't want to know it. They just want to have that experience to carry with them, to propagate, to use your word.
I think uranium is like, whenever I've been in, my family's been in, environmental work, like, for generations. And we often see greenies who, like, the answer to climate change is nuclear power. And we're like, hey, you do realize you're still going to fuck over native people. Like, native blood is shed at every single stage of nuclear extraction. We die in their minds. We die when they don't clean their shit up from their radioactive dust. We die when there's a spill on our lands from their fucking railroads. And then when it finally goes to production, those production facilities are in our communities. And then when it comes, and then we are once again asked to bear the brunt of storing the toxic fucking waste. So it's like, my people are going to have to deal with this for 200,000 years. That's what you're asking us to do when you're advocating to save us from climate change. You're asking Native people to bear the brunt, in our body, down to our DNA. And I'm not sure how much more violent than that you can get. My buddy Andre is taking a picture of me sitting in this tiny, tiny pool.
That's awesome.
And, it's literally just big enough for me to sit in.
I think what you're saying is 100% right, because I think that's the future is nuclear, unfortunately, because that's where they'll eventually find the way, because that is still a carbon zero outcome, and that's what they're trying to push, and that's what legislation's gonna see. And because you know what, the thought leaders that are respected by legislation, people like Elon, people like Eric Weinstein, they see nuclear as the way forward, because it's futuristic and it sounds cool, and it's carbon neutral, and the carbon footprint is more, and the waste footprint is less than it is now, because you have those used fuel rods. You can put them in a, like you said, size of an abandoned lot. You can just pile them up all there. Eventually it's all going to bleed into Indian country with what you're saying, and I agree with you.
Or we could just refine them till they're weapons grade, and then what's going to happen when we have a bunch of bored, pissed off nuclear physicist natives who are like, guys, I know we're fucking hybrid. You're tired of the carbons. You want to get some plutonium isotopes? Hey, my cousin knows a guy. And then that's how Indian country gets the ball.
Well, and then that's
hey, be wary what you wish for, fuckers. Don't let it happen. You don't want us to be a global superpower. Trust me.
Well, what's interesting too is it goes back to another Graham Greene character. What you said is like that militance is like it's rooted in our oppression. Like you have Mowgli. No, not Mowgli. That's the fucking Jungle Book. Mowgli, played by Graham Greene, when he's like, "What do you want to do?" He's like, "I want to stick dynamite up fucking George Washington's nose and watch it, blow off." And like that's at the heart of all of that pain and oppression, like destruction, and what you're saying, that violence that you speak of in your community, and I think in a lot of indigenous communities, like that's because that's a result that you can see, instead of what you guys are doing, what fighting the good fight. Like it takes years, months, a lot of struggle, a lot of missed meals, a lot of cold nights, a lot of hot days, but destruction and violence, it feels good because you can see like results immediately.
Yeah. And I joke about like seeing your enemies driven before you, but like whenever you go toe to toe with like their mercenaries, their goons, and then they retreat and you're still standing on your land, it's the best thing ever. It's like, I live for these moments. They don't happen often, but I live for them.
And so you talk about some of those experiences in your book?
I mean, I vaguely mentioned them once or twice, but like mostly the book, I'll probably mention more of them in the new one.
What is your new book called again?
And we will know ourselves by more than the trail of our dead.
Yep. You don't like short titles.
Nah. I mean, nah. Why not make a long title? Because it's also, when you do the abbreviation is super long too.
That's awesome. So when is that slated to come out?
I don't know. Like, I've gotten the like I went over 100 pages with the first book, and I might do half that for the second, because to make it more of a regular book of poetry size. So many of my poems are incredibly short, and I just feel like there's like so many moments, because like pandemic, uprising, still standing rock, and then teachings. Like I'm like, there's still plenty of people who haven't really learned from what we learned at Standing Rock.
Right.
Like, or they took the incredibly wrong lessons. Like there was a whole pipeline fight down in Florida at the Sable pipeline fight, and like people, mostly white folks, who really tried to recreate Standing Rock. And it's like, guys, we need to stay in peace and prayer. It was like, yeah, that's not what really shut down the pipeline. You actually have to go stop it. And there's this whole other thing, is like, what happens when the indigenous community doesn't want to fight? Like, I met people who were organizing around barriers, and I'm not going to name names, but they didn't want to bring in water protectors and frontliners to go square off with the machines that were going to do extraction over at barriers. And they're like, we don't want another Standing Rock. And it's like, well, you're going to fucking lose unless you stop it. And now you're carving out a territory for not indigenous resistance. And that's it's a meme, dude. It's a trope that most people don't really understand. Is, if you look at all of these major fights that are going on outside of, like, I don't know, I'd say 93, you'll see the absence of indigenous leadership, or inversely, you'll see indigenous leadership that stepped up to intentionally quell or shut down indigenous resistance. And it's a thing that nobody really talks about. Almost nobody.
I think that's a good place to, kind of wrap this up, because that's, when it comes to representation in media, that's not what gets talked about. Even among our native newspapers and our native media outlets, we don't tell that story, that the biggest fights we have are with ourselves. But really, that's what we need to start to tell, so we can ourselves believe it, because we are only told what we're told. And unless we're on the front lines fighting the fight, we don't know the truth. And we need to.
I wrote a piece, and it was called "What to Do When Your Elders Are Wrong." And like, most people will say, well, like, those folks who are saying that are not real elders. They're elders. No. We have legitimate elders who make incorrect decisions. And also, historically, Lakota people, our elders didn't govern. They advised. And most people don't understand that. But there's also the continuation or variation on that theme, is not what to do when your elders are wrong, but what to do when your community won't lead the fight. Do you stop fighting? because people stand in your way? Or do you just like there at Standing Rock? We were waiting for a Sitting Bull to show up, and he never did. Yeah. All of, like, for victory, what we needed was just literally a hoop papa to say charge. Because whenever an Oglala did it, they were shut down.
I think there's that in itself is a whole podcast, not just a episode. That's a whole show in itself.
I know, right?
Is just unpacking that dynamic, just Dapple itself from how, you know, its entire life cycle to where it is now. Like that is its own podcast. And for those of you that are fighting the fight, that hear Mark. For those of you that hear Mark say the things that he's saying, and you're just like, wow, why is nobody talking about that? Fucking dig into it. Those people are out there on social media. They're posting it. They're being cryptic because they have to protect themselves at times. But if you have the opportunity to do that, to fight the fight, I mean, while Mark is sitting in a pool to cool himself, he looks happier than somebody who has $5 million in his 401k that's 60 years old and is about to retire. Like, oh, I can finally live in that bungalow that I overpaid for. And, you know, Mark seems to have fulfilled, and he misses. And I think what's important from what he said about his career that he misses, it's not the work. He didn't say anything about the facilities, anything about his house, his mortgage. He said he misses the kids, the engagement with the kids. And that's the most powerful thing. I think he can take a lot of kernels of truth from what he said, but the most important thing is we got to set the kids on the right path. And I feel like we're in a good place with where we can catapult into with representation and with people like Mark and with younger people willing to fight the fight. And yeah, there's a lot of fighting that still needs to be done. And I can tell you, Mark, it makes me happy to know that you're out there fighting that and that you're willing to make that sacrifice to be a road warrior, basically. Be Mel Gibson. Yeah.
Oh.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks a lot. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and y'all have a good one.